Hey, everybody. Are you with me when I say life can be amazing at times, but it can also be extremely challenging? I know, I've been there myself, learned some valuable life lessons along the way, and now I'm here to help you. It's no coincidence you found your way to the Relevate Podcast. I'm your host, Rena Olson, a self-proclaimed inspirer of others. Together, we're going to dive deep into raw and honest conversations with real people. My hope is that through these stories, you too will be inspired and ready to tackle whatever's holding you back or breaking your heart. Then you'll be free to live a life of purpose and true fulfillment. I promise it's possible. Let's relevate. Hey friends, thank you for joining me for this episode of the Relevate Podcast. My guest today is Dusty Labossiere, who has both a heartbreaking yet hopeful story. If you've ever loved someone with addiction or lost someone to suicide, Dusty's life story will no doubt inspire you and give you hope of what's possible. I cannot say this enough. Recovery from addiction is possible. It's not easy, but the cycle of addiction can be broken. Listen in and share this important episode and learn more from my friend, Dusty Labossiere. Dusty Labossiere, welcome to the Relevate Podcast.
Glad to be here.
So good to see you, and you're looking just like all spiffy in your flannel and your vest. Got cold on us.
I'm a dad now, so I can wear the vests. I'm starting a dad vest collection.
Oh,
yeah. I get made fun of sometimes, but I kind of like it. Kind of like the vests.
The dad thing.
Yep.
Yeah. So I am so glad to be here with you today, and just to kind of unpack some of your story. For me, you are just a face of hope. You've been through a lot to be so young, and I just appreciate you being willing to be here and to share your story.
Yeah, without sounding cheesy or cliche, I really do enjoy opportunities like this because it is like miraculous that I'm in a place where I am, and then it's just such a big contrast between pre No Longer Bound and post No Longer Bound, and it's not to say like that was like the one and done. That kind of there's still a ton that happened to me from a negative side after I went through No Longer Bound, but glad to be here authentically.
Yeah, I know you. I don't know you well, and I'd love to learn more about kind of what happened pre-addiction, pre-No Longer Bound.
Sure. I'm a Georgia native. I grew up over in Marietta. If you're familiar with Cobb County or East Cobb, I grew up over by the Big Chicken.
You're not Southern at all.
I know, but I grew up here. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that my dad was from New England, from Connecticut. I grew up in the suburbs. I went to a pretty diverse high school. So I just never, I have Southern tendencies on certain things, but I think I had a pretty good balance. My mom made me listen to Achy Breaky Heart and a bunch of other kind of country in the car growing up and stuff like that, which I didn't like. And it's taken me 8 years of living in Forsyth County for it to finally kind of rub off on me a little bit. But yeah, I grew up in East Cobb, just working class family. My dad was a blue collar worker, put in flooring, tile, all kinds of stuff. So I grew up working hard with my father on a lot of that stuff, kind of as a gopher, doing gopher work, humping in tools and out and, different stuff like that. I've got one younger sister. Her name's Destiny, and she is a year and a half younger than I am. She's a paramedic / firefighter over in
cool.
I think she's in off Sixes Road in Cherokee County now. My mom, she's now a grandmother. We just brought our first child into the world.
Oh, cool.
His name is Van Elliott. I'm married to a lovely lady named Ashley.
Yes, she's beautiful.
Yeah, she is. And my dad is he's been passed away since 2013. So it's been and that's been a wild ride too, especially having a kid for the first time. That's kind of brought a lot of that stuff back up to the surface. But I grew up not too different from a lot of other kids from the surface. And I know we were talking about before we got the podcast rolling is, a lot of people walk around with brokenness.
Sure.
And, I grew up in a household where my dad was really in and out of, extreme substance abuse, like alcohol, alcoholism. I was in AA meetings before I even really knew what they were. Like, I'd go sit down in these rooms with my dad as a kid, and I'd see all like the second and third hand coffee cups. Like, it smelled like cigarettes. People would cuss. Everybody would go put chairs up and back after the meetings. I never really understood what that was until I got a little bit older. There were
So how old were you?
Like when I was in meetings like that, I don't know, probably like maybe like late elementary school and up, 4th, 5th grade, stuff like that.
So he was fighting it and trying.
Yeah, there was about a 3 or 4 year period where he was completely sober, and those were some of the best times because there wasn't a lot of fear on like. We had built up enough momentum, I think, as a family where we weren't afraid of like the knockdown, drag out fights, the cops showing up, my dad, just kind of losing it. And I never got to share, not that I didn't get to share that with my friends and my friends growing through high school. It was just like, as a kid, you don't know how. Yeah. And I was just ashamed of it, really. Yeah, I didn't feel like anybody else was going through that stuff. Yeah. Ugh. Yeah. So I kind of grew up like that. Things were, I like to describe my childhood as, some, like when things were good, they were really good. And when things were bad, they were really bad. It seems like there were just like extremes on both sides of it. My dad was in and out of jail a couple of times, went to prison for about 1.5 years for violating probation. That was, I think, while I was in high school. So like there was actually 1.5 years of us going to go see my dad while he was in prison over in Milledgeville. And my mom would try to make that the best as she could. Yeah. I've been a dad for, 5 or 6 months, but I can't imagine trying to like, make that a positive experience. But like, I'd go see my dad. We'd have like this bag full of quarters, the vending machines, and you'd go sit down with him, and she'd try and go take us to downtown Milledgeville to like just go walk around the square and stuff like that. Looking back on it, my mom was incredible at being able to like keep it together. Yeah. I know she just had to, but yeah, she did a good job.
She stood by him?
Yeah, she did. And I think my mom probably went through, 10 times more than like any other kind of spouse would. There were multiple times that my dad tried. I don't think they were like bona fide attempts at suicide, but I think, there were a couple times that like I've got a memory in my head of my dad with a tube from the exhaust going into his car while he was sitting in it. That was, my mom found him. My dad was, super drunk, and we would disconnect the exhaust, and then he would go reconnect it back and just sit in there. There was one time that a gun had gone off in the garage. So like, and then finally, like, spoiler alert, my dad finally kills himself in 2013. That was it was a week after I got engaged to my wife. Oh. So my parents divorced when I was probably like 15 or 16 years old. That really set the stage for like my own self-destruction. And it was because I really felt like my entire family disintegrating, and to bring a lot of like my angst and anger to the forefront of some of this stuff is, I grew up in church, and my concept of God at that point was like, well, you pray and you ask for things from God. Well, the only thing that I wanted was my parents to stop fighting, my dad to stop, just quit, like, why can't you stop drinking? That was something in my head where it was like, I don't understand why you can't just quit drinking when like the consequences are like losing your family. Like, why wouldn't you, as a kid, you just can't, or even as a teenager, it's hard to process stuff like that. So without knowing it, I was so angry with God for being in this, position. And I got handed these cards that, some of them were really hard. Yeah. And I don't want to paint my life as like just a huge tragedy. There were a lot of really good times in my childhood, but some of them were really difficult. And, so going into No Longer Bound, at that point I was 22 years old, and I was so just filled with anger, resentment, and shame and guilt for, finally putting my own family through what my father had already put us through. I felt like it wasn't even, like I felt suicidal. I never really actually wanted to kill myself. I just, I would imagine it like, man, this would be much easier if I wasn't
despair.
here. Yeah. Yeah. Lots of despair.
So when did you start medicating?
I first experimented with drugs when I was 13 years old. I remember, and again, this isn't good either, but it's true. I remember experimenting or smoking pot for the first time with my cousins, who I looked up to. I mean, they're still like brothers to me. And that was like, I think after a youth group meeting with church. So it's like, you've got church and drugs kind of like intertwining with each other. And I actually really didn't enjoy smoking pot for the first time. I felt really guilty and paranoid. Just was like bona fide miserable for the entire time. After that, I started drinking a little bit, like in high school, like 15, 16 years old. I wasn't a huge fan of drinking. Don't get me wrong, I've been drunk plenty of times, but that wasn't ever my go-to. And looking back on it, was like this perfect storm of like lack of self-esteem, family unit falling apart, no purpose, not really a lot of fatherly advice, a lot of stress at home, things like that like, well, once I finally found some of these mind-altering substances, it really kind of filled a void for me. And I almost found like this weird identity in it of being like the guy who knew a lot about drugs, which is, look, it's embarrassing to even say out loud because it's so, it just seems so pretentious. But, like I'd read out, and this is like right when the internet was kind of like, being.
It's so typical you though, Dusty.
I remember like vividly
expert.
I remember vividly getting in these fights with my mom about, once my drug abuse became known, of us just getting in fights about it. And like, I would, throw all these, like this information back to her. And like, since then we've talked and she's like, you were so frustrating because you were like educated about like the drugs that you were doing. It may, again, in a non-arrogant way, it may have saved my life that I would actually research a lot of these drugs before I did them, because I was pretty cautious about a lot of the stuff that I did. I know that sounds ridiculous because I was like using heroin and Oxycontin, and I experimented with, all kinds of, I think the only thing I didn't try was meth or crack at some point. Those are the only things I just never, I guess I had access to, or that I tried pretty much everything else I could get my hands on. That started around age 17 when I first tried Oxycontin for the first time. And it was just a pill. I knew that it was in the class of opiates. And I remember a lot of, people that struggle with substance abuse will tell you, like, they remember a time doing it for the first time they did it, like wanting to feel like that, like forever. Yeah. And that was the case with opiates for me. It's like, I did that one time and I was like, I want to feel like that all of the time. In the beginning, it felt like it enhanced a lot of the things, but underneath it was really like destroying my social circle, my relationships, kind of in tatters anyway. Yeah. Maybe even because I didn't have a good fundamental understanding of how to ask for help, how to process my own emotions, how to be in good relationships, how to forgive. There's a lot of stuff that I got the tools handed to me at No Longer Bound that I didn't have access. Not that I didn't have access to, but I don't know. They just weren't in my tool bag. Right. I just didn't know about them. Sure. You go to church, you sing the songs, you hear the guy talk about different parts of the Bible. You take communion. We were in like an Episcopal. We went to a bunch of different churches, but for me, it just didn't seem like real. It felt, and the more resentment that built up in me, I just felt like, man, this feels like a cheap trick. Mm-hmm. And why would I be in a position like this? I didn't do anything to deserve it. So, that really kind of set the stage for substance abuse and going into No Longer Bound at 22.
When did you lose your dad?
I was 2013, so that would mean 6 years ago, 24, 25.
Okay. I
was 25 when I got married, so it had been 24.
So are you and your dad a lot alike, personality-wise, do you think?
I try to take the good parts of my dad and keep those. We definitely are in a sense of my dad was very blunt and straightforward. Also pretty authentic. I like to consider myself authentic. Life's too short to be fake. Yes. And I just hate feeling that way. I would rather lose maybe a shallow relationship with somebody because they don't like me than waste time on it. Time's something that you can always get money back. You can always meet new people. You can repair relationships. Time's, you don't get that back. I like to think we had the same sense of humor. My dad was hilarious. Just had a really good way of being able to tell jokes and very lively. But then I also think that I get a lot of my mom's probably heart from an emotional side. I'm super sensitive. And I think my dad was really sensitive too. He just never was able to break through the tough guy mentality, which I think ultimately might have led to part of his demise. But yeah, my mom is, even she is ultra accepting and was somebody I always and still always feel like really safe to talk to her about anything. She doesn't know anything about real estate. And I just had this situation like a couple weeks ago that, without going into details about it, I know she didn't know anything or she's not that well versed in it. Sorry, Mom, if you're listening to this. She actually has her license. She's just part-time. But I remember I'm like, I can't call anybody right now because everybody that I'm thinking about in a real estate situation has a dog in the fight, so to speak. And I can talk to my mom and then she'd just listen. She's a great listener. So I like to think I'm a good balance between my mom and dad. And I like to pick out both their attributes and kind of, capitalize on them. Dad was also ultra hardworking. Like, I'm hardworking. And I think my dad probably is outworked me on a regular basis. So I learned a lot of work ethic, organization, no excuses. Like, you just do it and, kind of like pull your bootstraps up and get it done. That served me really well in a lot of arenas in my life. So I'm thankful for that.
Well, and I'm just so glad you have your mom and that your mom has her son back because, it's just heartbreaking to see the families that love people who love someone with an addiction. It's just, I can't imagine how hard that must be. So I know. And for her to love a man who was consumed by alcohol and then to watch her son kind of slip down that same slope. Yeah. God love her for she just hanging in there and she grew up in a household, it was my grandmother, her mom and my grandfather divorced before I think she graduated high school. I think she was growing up and it was because her grandfather was basically, having a lot of affairs on my grandmother. So she grew up in a pretty tumultuous household. My mom she's had it tough. She's had a tough life. I think that's kind of like forged her into somebody that values the important things in life. She's a great woman. She's made her stronger. Yeah, she's easy to be around. Very cool. What do you believe was the key to your recovery? That's a good question. It's going to be hard to narrow it down, but I think it's a good mixture of being completely honest with yourself and other people and being willing to make the hard decisions along the way. It's just a lifestyle. I actually view, it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing to talk about, but I actually look at those 5 years of heavy substance abuse that got me into No Longer Bound as one of the largest assets that I have, because it brought me to a place physically and emotionally and spiritually that I felt reborn in a sense. I don't know if I would have ever had any of the stuff that I do if I didn't go through all that stuff. And so it grew me up really quick, and it's a long process. In 2019, people are looking for quick fixes. I've just found out anything worthwhile is almost always a lifelong pursuit. Whether or not it's health or relationships or business. Everybody wants it done tomorrow, right. And it's just persistence. Yeah, I'm a super stubborn person. You achieve something and then you change your focus and go after something else. Which, by the way, I'm glad we're meeting in here and not the place that I originally was trying to bring you into. I don't think that would have went well. A little too noisy. There's a lot happening here at the Thrive Co-working Center. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty good business plan. Yeah, it is. Not a bad idea. So I think I'm more driven than your average bear, I think. And again, I don't mean that arrogantly. I just know that it's easy for me to will myself through things, and I just do it. I don't mind the suffering, and I don't mind the pain in certain aspects.
So, when I first got into No Longer Bound, I was like, and at that point, I'd probably picked up like maybe 15 or 20 white chips, at AA meetings and stuff like that. I tried to do the same thing that my dad did. And I have nothing against AA or the 12 steps. There's a ton of spiritual principles in the 12 steps. Just No Longer Bound had a different, I'm thankful that I was able to go there. And I wasn't born in like Washington or Nevada or something like that. Just didn't have access to it. But I just told myself when I got there, I'm like, no matter what, I will stay here 60 days until I can see my family. Because back in the day, you couldn't see your family for 2 months when you checked into the program. Like you checked out. I mean, so. Which
I think was a brilliant strategy.
Yeah. I don't know what the policies are now.
Yeah, I know it's changing a lot, but that was the marker you set for yourself. If you would have set a 10-month marker, I gotta be here 10 months. Yeah. But to will yourself to do 60 days, it's like, okay, I can do that.
After 60 days, it was I think I'd built enough relationships inside the house with these men that were from all different walks of life, but similar situations of like, despair, destruction. And there's so much camaraderie to fuel you through this whole thing, so much accountability. And I just wound up staying through it. And I graduated, then I stayed as an SLT. I know they're called interns now. And then I had the chance to work there for almost 4 years afterwards. So all in all, I stayed there for almost about 6 years, from 2011 to 2016, about halfway through. So maybe about 5.5 years. Yeah. Then I went and pursued a career in real estate.
Yeah. So back to the one key to your recovery. I think you said being honest. Is that right? Do you think that's really the...
Yeah, you have to be honest with yourself. And I think people can be so convoluted that they are not even aware of how full of it that they are. Mm-hmm. Like they get so far off track from what's authentically true. They're pointing the finger at everybody else.
Yes.
They're passing off ownership. They are blaming. And, I view honest these days as like when I go to say I'm angry or I'm, mad, it's like it's because I'm either afraid or I got hurt. My feelings got hurt. I consider that honest, right? And I try to use that in my language when I'm speaking to other people, even with other grown men, like, oh, I got my feelings hurt, and it's still a good humility check for me to be like, I am sensitive. I do get bruised easily from an ego standpoint. But the biggest difference between me now and me then is that when my ego got bruised then is that it like fundamentally like bruised my identity. And these days, I just know that my identity is separate from what I do or what I don't do. Yeah. And that it's I have eternal life through Christ on this side, which is that's such a hard thing to describe, the big difference, but it just is. Like if my whole career was to burn out tomorrow and I lost everything and, a bunch of bad things happen, I think I could still have peace in knowing that, that's separate from other things. I'm not saying I'd be in a good mood.
Yes.
I'm saying that I just don't think I would. I'm not afraid of going out and just burning my life down with drugs and alcohol anymore. I'm just really not. I don't have fear of that anymore. It's taken a long time to get there.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. It's been worth going through it. So.
Well, what a blessing. So was it a spiritual healing for you, you think, that occurred?
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people, again, I'm going to sound like, and I did teach at No Longer Bound for a few years, but we like to view a human as like you're a physical body with a soul, and that soul breaks down into your mind, will, and emotions. And then inside of that is your spirit, and they're separate. So you're like a 3-part entity walking around on earth, body, soul, spirit. And, if the beliefs dictate everything that we do in life is true, I think those are inside of our spirit, so to speak. So if I believe that I am, shameful, or I believe that, I'm not good enough, I never will be, or I don't deserve certain things, then it's going to show up in my day-to-day life. And again, No Longer Bound's a long process of, I would say like kind of peeling back the onion, so to speak.
Sure.
Once you finally get to a certain stage in that program, they call it, I think Revelation now, it's called Inner Healing when I was there. It's kind of like the meat and potatoes of the program. Not to say the other stuff isn't important, but you know, when you're dealing with like kind of the heavier stuff, and it was this build up to that one class, but I would definitely say there's something spiritually healing about bearing your entire soul, no matter how shameful it is to other human beings. And obviously the risk is getting judged or ridiculed or, you know, being known for being the dude that did those things or didn't do. And working through forgiveness, being able to grieve, break judgments, ties with, you know, people, reconciliation between me and my family members. You know, that was all stuff that I got led by other men who had gone through the same process when I got there. So I cannot, I mean, like to put that in from like a dollar perspective, like I paid $10 for this Chick-fil-A meal before I got here. Like, I wonder what the price tag on something like that is. And it's just, it's hard to calculate because it's literally afforded me almost everything else that I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So amazing. And I love the fact that you guys come out so transparent and so willing to reveal, hey, you hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
But people that haven't experienced, I'm sure a lot of guys look at you like,
it's weird.
Dude, what?
So pro tip to those guys coming out of, No Longer Bound or interns is that there's a balance. I think coming out as sensitive, and I think No Longer Bound's gotten better at this, especially the transition period that they've installed in there. The world outside of No Longer Bound is not going to care nearly as much and I don't want to paint the picture of the world being like this dark place where nobody cares. That's false. A lot of people care outside. But you just have to realize, like, everybody's running their own lives outside. We got their job, their kids, their health, the things to do, the emergencies, and people just don't care as much to talk about your feelings. At No Longer Bound, it's like at the drop of a hat, if you need to go talk to somebody about anything that's going wrong with your emotions, you can have it. It's like a 24/7 counseling session. And in a lot of ways, it's like really been it's a luxury in a sense. So my big advice to anybody coming out of there is like, learn to wear different types of armor in different settings outside of No Longer Bound. Like if you're going into a business meeting, like if you're going in for a job interview, you probably want to be a little bit more guarded than if you're going to church, or if you're going to go hang out with your buddies or something like that. It's just, there's a time and place for it. And I still think that transparency and authenticity can win in a lot of scenarios where we still don't give it a lot of credit. Yep. But it can also have the reverse effect to people that are just adverse to having, if you have somebody that is like just emotionally shallow, especially in I've had plenty of situations in my business where it's like, okay, that's not a person to share these things with, right? I'm not going to interviews, listing appointments with sellers and saying like, I used to be a heroin addict. Let me list your house. But I really think if they knew the full story, like if you watched a 3-hour like Forrest Gump type movie about Dusty Labossiere, I think I would probably have a little bit more credit about what I've been through and that I'm sitting at the table with you on time, knowing what I'm talking about, in a suit, in a nice truck, with a wedding ring on my finger, that you'd be able to kind of look past, well, this guy did these things at this point, but he really turned it around.
Yes.
So, and it's a 3-part. It's not just me, it's other people, and God's involved in it too. So, I mean, I can't take all the credit for it, but yeah, I did. I fought for it hard.
Sure you did. Sure you did. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, and I love being around people in recovery because, they're a work in progress. And I think people who haven't been through addiction, they just kind of stop developing or stop trying to be better. Yeah. Or, it's like, this is me. This is what you get. No, we are all works in process, and we all need to be working at getting better and looking at those dark holes in our heart where we need to improve, where we can get better.
Yeah.
And, I think the people that have been through serious crap, they're just, I mean, I just respect you so much for what you've been through and how you're willing to put yourself out there as, hey, I represent hope. You know, people can get better. Sons do get better. I did get the gorgeous girl.
Yeah.
I have a son. I have a great career. For you to just be able to, and you're mentoring others, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, I'll be at No Longer Bound at Family Recovery this Sunday talking about forgiveness if you want to come check it out. So I doubt this podcast will be, I don't know. What's your turnaround time on these things?
Well, that's pushing me a little bit, Dusty.
That's pushing you.
That is awesome. So let's talk about kind of the transition to real estate and what attracted you to that and kind of that whole journey, because it's super cool.
I got to give credit to my mother-in-law, Jennifer Hodge, wonderful lady. Yes. She really nudged me to go and get my real estate license. It's no secret that if you're working nonprofit, you're probably not getting paid what you're worth. And, this is in no negative aspect, a reflection of No Longer Bound. I still love the daylights out of No Longer Bound. I just, looking to grow a family and, potentially have my wife be a stay-at-home mom. And she was by far the breadwinner at that point in our marriage. I just wanted to kind of be able to provide more financially. So I made the decision to jump into real estate. At first I tried to do it part-time until I realized that you can't be a good part-time anything, especially a real estate agent. So I kind of just jumped into it. I got my license back in 2000 and I think it was 14. Yeah, 14. So I've had my license for about a little bit over 5 years now. And it took me a while to come into any, sort of like moderate success. The reason that I liked real estate is because I get control over what I do. So that means front to back, I'm self-employed. That means front to back, I get to structure my day the way that I want to. I get to choose the activities that wind up producing results. I don't have to take direction from anybody else if I don't want to. And for me, that's important. And I don't mean that like nobody's my boss. I mean, my clients are I am a servant to my clients. Yeah. And unless you are absolutely crazy, I'm going to work with you and I'm going to do the best job that I can. So I just like the feeling of like, I really relish in the feeling of like, I've done this. I built it with my own hands. I'm responsible for what's happening, good or bad, and I can take 100% ownership. Outside of that, I just really like people. Financially, it's really lucrative and rewarding. And so this has really just been like a good mixture of like, it makes sense on a lot of different cylinders. And so, now I'm trying to grow a little bit of a team. I was able to be top agent in 2018 from a standing start in 2000. So I started at Century 21. And I didn't even know that I was in a sales gig. When somebody told me I was in sales, I was like, oh, it's weird. I didn't even think about real estate that way. I'm like, oh, I don't know what I was thinking. I was so naive getting into it. And so I went over to Mark Spain in 2017, did okay. I think I sold like maybe 35 plus homes, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
But the thing about Mark Spain is that, they're handing you all the appointments and leads and stuff like that, which is a substantial, if not the majority of like a successful real estate career is having the phone ring and having people contact you and knowing how to get that to happen. So, I made a certain amount of money and the splits were so over there that I did the math. I'm like, well, if I went to any other brokerage with a different split, I'm like, I could do 25% of the business and make about the same amount of money. So I tried to negotiate my split at Mark Spain. I couldn't get anywhere where I wanted to. I stayed true to myself, and I went back to Century 21, where from 2018, that year I wrote on my whiteboard in my office at my house, I said, I want to be the top producing agent at Century 21, which I felt like an idiot writing that on the board because I'm like, that's way out of reach. I can't do it. But I just bust my ass all year long. I did all the stuff that I knew I was supposed to, but wasn't like, I didn't want to do videos on Facebook. I didn't want to, it's uncomfortable. And since then I've done it enough where it's not uncomfortable. It's actually enjoyable. But I've got such a massive sphere of influence between No Longer Bound, being a native Georgian around here. even my gym that I go to, at CrossFit, like I've been there for long enough where people just approach me and they're like, I watch your videos. My business is really, really based on my sphere of influence. That's the foundation of it. And we're looking to create and generate business in different streams outside of that. But that's really been the bedrock of any kind of success I've had. And, from a 30,000 foot view, I'm still a newer agent. I've only been in the business, for about 5 years, and about maybe 3.5 of those have been full time. So, I'm borderline obsessed with trying to figure out how to do it better, bring my people more value, streamline processes. And I pride myself on just being really good with communication and being really upfront and honest with people about the decisions that they're going to make. Ultimately, I don't make the decisions that my buyers and sellers make, but I really try and give a clear picture of what their options are so that they can make informed decisions.
Yeah. Well, it's so cool because I know my husband and I, our home truly is our castle.
Yeah.
And indeed, since a lot of your customers your clients are in recovery, to help them realize the dream of home ownership. Yeah. I mean, that is really a cool thing to be part of that journey with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would think that's very fulfilling.
I've worked with so many people from No Longer Bound too. That's just been like, man, like 5 years ago, dude, you were, at the bottom of a bottle, like your life was a wreck, and to kind of go through the journey. I won't name names on here, but if if I've helped you out and you've come through No Longer Bound, like they've seen me grow up and I've seen them grow up, and just being able to watch people have families, get homes, get careers and stuff like that.
Cool.
It's been such a cool process. I I grew up wanting to be a writer. That's what I think the first thing I wanted to be when I was a kid. And then I wanted to be an architectural engineer because of Roller Coaster Tycoon, that video game that came out. I really wanted to build roller coasters till I realized how bad I was at math. And then that was scratched out. And then I went through a bunch of others. I wanted to join the Navy and be a Navy SEAL at some point. And so I'm looking back on all this stuff. I'm like, all right, well, the Navy SEAL stuff kind of found itself in the CrossFit gym that I go to, and my, relentless pursuit of being in good shape and, being a writer. I still write a good bit. And I try and share stuff pretty, transparent on social media platforms because people need to hear stories like mine. Yeah.
Speaking of,
yep.
I actually grabbed one off of your Facebook page. I'm going to let you read it because
sure.
I think it's just really cool.
I think a lot of pursuing a more fulfilling life is willing to change one's beliefs. The people who believe they can, no matter what, will always have more available to them than the people who believe they are limited, a victim, or can't. It's as simple as that. The people who believe they can preside over the people who believe they cannot. Another day down, what are you going to do with the next one? So you watch? Do you listen to any Gary V type stuff on? Anyway, he's got a big social media presence. But I just posted something the other day where it's him standing next to this canvas that he's selling, but it says "You're gonna die" on it.
Oh yeah, I did see that.
So I'm just also a huge fan of really considering death. We're all going to die, and people don't I've had a couple of people that's dark and our way to be dark, Dusty, and stuff like that. And it is dark, but I just, it's also true. And so if you're not really taking into consideration how much time you have left, I'm 30, I'll be 31 in December. If I'm lucky, I'll live 2 times as long as I've lived right now. And so it kind of lights a fire under me to go do the things that I really want to do and say no to the things that I really don't want to do, which might be even more important than saying yes. So I've gotten good at saying no to things.
Yeah. And I love the message behind this because I really think so much is mindset.
Yeah, it is.
So much is mindset. Yeah. And to live a countercultural life, especially social media, the news media, they're just blasting you one thing, but you have to draw a line in the sand and say, that's not really what I believe.
Social media is a funny thing because now that I'm in sales and in real estate, I have to utilize it so much to remain visible and top of mind with people. And so it is a tool, but the truth is that we all want social media. If we didn't, it wouldn't be available to the extent that it is. We wouldn't be spending millions of dollars and hours. We wouldn't be bleeding, sweating, and crying over this thing that it gets a bad rap. And I think really just what social media is a reflection of who we are as a culture. There's a lot of really good stuff and there's a lot of really bad stuff in there too. And so if you're feeding yourself the right kind of stuff through social media, I think it can actually enrich your life. But if you're, if you're feeding yourself a bunch of junk, it's like living off of, a Quick Trip diet. I mean, how healthy can you be if you only eat at Quick Trip?
Taquitos.
And I love Quick Trip. It's my favorite gas station. But I'm just trying to say is, what we decide to put into our body and our mind is important. And again, I sound polished, but this has been, like 8 or 9 years in the making of like really trying to progress. And I think the feeling of progression is also really important too. Knowing that it's not a straight line up, but kind of like the stock market is, it is going up, but it's kind of like this zigzag all the way up. So you have to be okay with losses and stuff like that, or a step back. I just recently had one, but knowing how to handle those is paramount too.
Well, and I love do you have a brokerage or what is?
So I'm just a sales agent in the state of Georgia. There's 2 licenses that you can basically have. It's either you're a sales agent or you're a broker. I'm not a broker, not yet. Right now in my business, it doesn't make sense for me to be a broker. I've got my own team. It's the Labossiere Group Real Estate. It's underneath Century 21 Results. And really, we're just, it's really a 3-man team. I've got an assistant. I've got a buyer's agent named Crawford Trimmer. And then I've got myself handling most of the listing stuff. And so we're just grassroots right now. And I'm looking to really, kind of what you're doing right now, I'm looking to get really serious about putting out a lot of content on social media, video, and more moving forward.
Cool. Well, and you're bringing in some NLB bros as well to kind of mentor and
yep.
help them learn the biz.
Clients and all sorts of other no longer bound affiliated people that have been in and around my business for sure.
That's very cool.
Yep.
So you mentioned your mother-in-law, Jennifer Hodge.
Yes.
And I know the story about her son, your brother-in-law. Yeah. Can we just talk a little bit about that? Because
absolutely.
I know it's a very difficult subject to talk about, but you can just share what happened with Robbie.
So since my wife and I got married in 2014, we have been we got hit really hard with some big stuff, like in the first 2-3 years of our marriage. First, my dad killed himself a week after I got engaged. And that was really, really stole a lot from both of us in what was supposed to be like a really happy time, an engagement. Yeah. So like the first thing that we're doing as an engaged couple is booking a flight to Connecticut to go put my dad in a ground somewhere. And that really, cast a huge shadow over the whole wedding, really. Like looking back on it, God, another thing that does so much damage is just like the idea of what a wedding is supposed to be and oftentimes what it really is. And there's so much pressure on these events that, it's supposed to be the best day of your life. And like, you've got all this money and people and things. And like, you hear this story all over and over again where it's like, we just really we weren't present. We didn't enjoy it that much. And we wish we would have done it another way. And so I have this love-hate relationship with weddings. I cry easily. So, I like to see people, get married and wish them on the new chapter of their lives. Cause marriage is awesome when it's awesome. Right. Anyway, fast forward. This was, I think it'll be 3 years ago. And, this Thanksgiving time, my brother-in-law, Robbie, and my wife's side of the family, they had 3 kids. Ashley, my wife, is the eldest. Robbie was the middle child, and then Lauren is bringing up the rear. She is, I think, 22 years old. Mike and Jennifer. Mike was the father. Jennifer's and Jennifer's the mother, obviously. But we were lying in bed, my wife gets a phone call, and she immediately starts screaming. Just the worst kind of screaming. The kind of screaming that you never forget about. So she tells me that Jennifer basically called us and said that Robbie's died or overdosed. I don't know what the actual words were, but we get into the car and we drive, as fast as I possibly can. I was probably doing like 90 plus the whole way from North Alpharetta over to Swanee where Jennifer's house is. And we get there and he's lying on the bathroom floor, overdosed. Paramedics show up, bring him to the hospital, and that started really like the next chapter of this entire event, which was him being in the hospital on life support for about a week or so. There was like this insidious false hope to begin with where like we all really latched onto it. And again, to bring back the thing of like a lot of people, and I know my wife still struggles with this, and I don't blame her, and I don't try to fix this. But she's, really upset with God and the idea of prayer over, we had hundreds, maybe thousands of people praying, to pull Robbie out of this. What good could possibly come out of, him overdosing at 23 years old? So over, a week, constantly at the hospital, sleeping on the floor,
and
people in and out.
It was one fake pill. Correct?
I think it was a fake pill. For the longest time, we thought it was, I think heroin or some kind of opiate, but I think the toxicology report showed that it was, and I'm not 100% sure, so I don't want to put out something that's false right there, but I believe it was a fake pressed pill that was sold to him. Yeah. Slowly but surely, worse news after worse news after worse news, like his activity, he's not responding, and basically they declared him brain dead at some point, and they had to,
Yeah.
If you've ever had to make the decision to pull somebody off, it's the worst thing. Even the way that I lost my father, which was like he checked himself into a hotel room and slapped a bunch of painkiller patches on him and basically went to sleep. I never got to see his body before he was cremated. With Robbie, it's like he's there, he's on the table, and it's just it's a horrible thing. It's still kind of fresh. It's 3 years. And
I've seen video footage of him, and the machine was breathing for him.
It's awful. Yeah, the whole thing it's absolutely awful. The damage and destruction left behind on that one is still very real to this day. Between the family, and even with my wife, it's been. I think we finally get each other a little bit on having lost something so big. Yeah. It's different because it's a sibling and it's a parent, and it's pretty natural to lose your parents before, you lose a sibling. That might be like some kind of silver lining. I was still 24 when I lost my father, but just my brother-in-law, Robbie, passing away, there's a ton of stress between me and my wife. Just trying to be married, and, getting in arguments and, and fights and stuff. And I think, we'd get into arguments about like these surface issues a lot of the time, but underneath it was just like, I don't know what to do with myself. So, and through that too, I also learned that, not just learned, like I knew it intellectually that people grieve differently, but like actually experience it. And like, my idea of what grieving was is like firmly shaped by No Longer Bound. And like, there's a process and you do it this way. And, and I, if you've ever tried to counsel your spouse before, I just realized like, maybe every now and then it would work, but I came just straight out of this, I'm a counselor. That's what I did over at No Longer Bound. So it made sense for me to try and like pull my wife through some of this stuff too. And it's like, the biggest ironic situation is like, it just doesn't work that way. I could be anybody else. Like if I was just a random dude on the side of the street and like saying the same things to my wife, it might, she might receive it, but it's something about being, a spouse where it's that reception level kind of goes down. So yeah, that's kind of the, my mother-in-law started Realty for Rehab, which is basically just a play on real estate. It's, her taking, and it's, there's a lot of different changes happening with that organization right now. it's a certified nonprofit. It's a 20 something
501c3.
Thank you. Nonprofit. Basically, the idea is that she's gonna give a portion, or an agent that is with Realty for Rehab is gonna give a portion of their commission and donate it to a nonprofit associated with addiction to the client's choice. Like they get to choose where it goes to. So
very cool.
Yeah. So she's very passionate about that, and seems like it's taking shape. And she's got a lot of attention on it too. So we'll kind of see what happens with it.
Yeah. I saw her this week at the drug summit.
Yeah.
And, it's, I'm so thankful she's able to use some of her grief and her energy in helping other people.
Yeah.
And I would think having a grandson is part of the healing.
There's been so many things that I could have sworn I was right about, and I wasn't. And like the things that I feel like I'm sure about that I'm right now, I'm not entirely convinced that 30 years from now, I'm going to be looking back at my 30-year-old self and be like, I was wrong about those things too. So as stubborn and closed-minded as I can be about certain things, you talk to anybody, I can sound polished and things like that when I'm talking to anybody. I could be very stubborn, and I could be very, and it's served me well in a lot of different areas. Like, I'm going to do what I want to do, and I'm going to do it this way. And I'm very, a man of principle. So if my heart's in it, I will do it. If it's not, then I'm not going to do it. Because I just don't have the time and don't want to do it. Don't want to produce energy towards something I don't believe in. So
sure.
Yeah, that's kind of the deal.
So tell me about little Van and how he's changed your life.
Yeah, Van. I think he looks like me, but has my wife's fair skin a little bit. So blue eye. He's got blue eyes. I don't. I've got brown eyes and black hair. So he's like a good mixture of me and my wife. I like to think that I'm pretty balanced on how cute I think my kid is, but I think he's he's got to be at least in the 90 percentile and above, I think. So you see a lot of other babies. You see a lot of other babies, and you're like, I think my kid's that's me. That's funny. That's me too. I'm so competitive that I'm my baby is literally cuter than other babies. Van has been, outside of marrying my wife, the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I think my wife would say the same thing. I'm pretty sure. I put a substantial amount of money on it. It's such a crazy process to be in an operating room. My wife really wanted to have a natural birth, but long story short, she was in labor they tried to induce her for such a large amount of time that they had to do a C-section. Literally, we had every option taken away from us. So no one tells you how quick that baby comes out when a C-section happens, but it's such a crazy thing to be handed a human being that my wife literally fostered inside of her and take it home with you a couple of days later. Yeah. It immediately changes everything. Anybody that's pregnant or that's about to have kids, all the cliches that they tell you, I got told that it goes by quick more than any other thing imaginable. But outside of that, it's such a cool club to be a part of. And then to have social media involved with it too. It's you get so many people that are excited, that are parents, to tell you the advice and tell you what's going to happen and get excited for you. I'm excited for my friends to start having kids too, because we're the first one out of our friends group to really start having, at least out of my high school buds and stuff like that too. We got married before everybody else did too. But he's ultra happy. He's just a super happy kid, all the time. If you look at him for long enough, he smiles, and not just like a really excited smile. So he's starting to get a little bit fussier now, but it's typically because he's hungry, or he needs a diaper change, or he's tired. It's really, sometimes he might just cry because we have no idea why. Outside of that, it's been great. It's cool to see him with my mom and my mother-in-law, my father-in-law. There's still a ton of pain there with knowing that I won't be able to hand my son to my dad, but it's I just can't change any of it, So,
but it's circle of life. The same blood that's flowing through your veins is in Van's veins, and it's I don't know. I know people that don't have faith. And having a kid, boy, if you don't believe in God, I mean, that is just,
it is. It's
how can it be possible?
Yeah, it's such a crazy process where you're like, man, this is, especially just from an ultrasound on, you're like, holy smokes, this is such a.
It's just so mind-boggling.
We watched this one special, and I would not recommend this if you're pregnant or your partner is pregnant. But we watched this one special on Netflix. It was an ABC special, like the 9 months that made you. And we thought it would be really cool to watch because, we're like, oh, we're pregnant and this is going to be interesting. We'll find out. And to speak about how intricate it was, it definitely underlined that. But every episode was like, what happens when pregnancy goes wrong? From like autism to like different other defects and things like that with a baby being born. And we watched like 2 or 3 of them. We were like just totally freaked out. So there's a lot of fear inside of the whole pregnancy process too, between, is my wife going to be okay? Is the baby going to be okay? I'll say this, and we're blessed because we had a healthy mom and healthy baby afterwards, and that's not always the case. But having a baby and having a child has not been as difficult as I thought it would be. We're very fortunate to have my wife stay at home full time right now, which is, and I know this is cliche too, it's actually more difficult than what I do. Trying to get anything done with a baby around is like, so like I'm out and I'm over at my office and I like what I do. So it's like, I'm able to kind of get away from the house. I do a lot of stuff at home too, so I can hang out with them. But yeah, it's an adventure for sure. We know we want to have at least one more. She wants to have 3. If we have a girl on the second one, I'm going to probably call it quits. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I remember when I first found out I was pregnant and I went out for a walk and I started worrying about my baby. Yeah. And she's 26 years old and I'm still just, trying to keep that worry in check because they are just the most precious things I can ever imagine.
The amount of discipline you have to have as a pregnant mom is nuts. I mean, like, obviously it's easy for us, or it's easy for, like me in recovery. I like to abstain from like drinking and things like that too. But all the things that you have to like avoid that you would normally do, is just crazy. You have to change your lifestyle immediately, like when you're pregnant. So, and I think it's and I think most of the time people do just change it right away for the sake of, this new life that has been created. Yeah. So
cool. Well, he is super, super cute.
Thank you.
Okay, one last question for you, Dusty Labossiere. The word relevate means to uplift or inspire.
Yes.
So in closing, what words do you have for my listeners about kind of your life journey?
Inspiration?
Yeah.
I really believe that like if you want something in life, that there's nothing preventing you from getting it outside of your own self. And if you can really like learn and train yourself to like break free from those like limiting beliefs, that you can have the kind of life that you want. If I handed you a blank canvas or a notebook and I said like, tell me what kind of life that you'd want to have, I really don't think that there's anything out. I mean, look, no one said it was going to be easy, but I really don't think that there's anything preventing you from doing it. So I believe that now. There are certain things like, if you want to be a multimillionaire, you can do that. It requires a lot of sacrifice, right? Unless you just inherited it. If you wanted to be an elite level sports athlete, if you wanted to be a New York best-selling author, you can do those things. You really can. And I think me burning it down to the ground as hard as I did between 17 and 22 really afforded me an early jump start in life to be really aware of what's happening inside of myself, my soul, and really aware of time and how short it is. Like, we're here for such a short amount of time. Yes. There should be urgency in your everyday about what are you doing with it. There's so many stories about people that just waste their life doing stuff that they don't want to do. If you're happy with where you're at, there is no one size fits all on like happiness or success. I've got friends who, again, not to name names, they're working menial jobs, but they're happy with what they're doing. Like that they don't have they might not have a family. They don't have a lot of debt. They can go travel. They can do all those things. So first you have to define what success is, and then you have to go get after it, like right away. And being able to dissociate your path from the mainstream, if it's off the beaten path, and being okay with that. Because you will have people that, the haters, people like to talk about, the haters out there. You're going to have those people that rain on your parade, or so to speak. You just have to be secure and confident enough to just kind of do what you want to do, even when it's unpopular, and, stay consistent on things like that. So
that is the word. I didn't realize you're just 30 years old.
I'm 30. I'll be 31 in December.
You are a wise
Thank
soul,
you.
Dusty Labossiere.
I appreciate it.
I'm so thankful to have had this time with you, and just am in awe of your wisdom and maturity, and just the lesson of your life, really, that we can all take something from. So
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here. Hug on that baby for me.
Will do.
So I know this was a difficult story for some of you to hear. I also know there are people out there who are struggling and need to hear Dusty's story, because addiction and family heartbreak do not have to have the last words. Please share this episode freely to those who may need to hear his raw and honest account of what it took to reclaim his life. If you are struggling with addiction, or know or love someone who is, your local church is a good place to start for resources and help. For those struggling with suicide, Pastor Louis Giglio of Passion City Church here in Atlanta recently shared a stunning message on the topic that I will post in the episode notes. I strongly encourage everyone to watch it. Also know help or someone to talk to is always available by calling the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. Thank you for joining me for the Relevate Podcast, a safe place to have these difficult yet hopeful conversations. I'm Rena Olson, and this is Relevate.